I'm Edward Warfield. I'm the publisher of City Biz, and I'm honored today to interview Daniel Lamarre, who's the executive chairman of Cirque du Soleil and recently came out with a book entitled Balancing Acts, Unleashing the Power of Creativity in Your Life and Work. Welcome, Daniel.
So happy to meet you and happy to talk about the book and my exciting journey at Cirque du Soleil.
It was a very exciting journey, and I look forward to our conversation today. In the introduction to Balancing Acts, you state that we're on the precipice of a new era, the age of the artist. Can you explain this statement in the context of your motivations for writing the book?
I had the opportunity when I joined Cirque du Soleil 21 years ago to work with amazing creators, starting with our founder, Guy Laliberté, and then Robert Lepage, and later on the Beatles and James Cameron, and observing all the sensitivity of those creators and those artists. I understood in the world where there is so many turmoil right now with the pandemic, with the environment issues and all of that, that I think sensitivity will become more and more important in our society. And who better than the artists to lead this new movement in our world?
And explain that. What's motivated you to write the book?
Yeah, it's because I started as a very traditional business guy before I joined Cirque du Soleil. And again, observing all those creators and artists, I've learned so much about creativity that I wanted to share my learnings with people, hoping that it will help enhance their personal creativity and their professional creativity. And that was the motivation behind it.
So let's go back to November 2000. You received a call from Guy Laliberté, the founder of Cirque du Soleil, to join the company. Tell us about your childhood. You had a sort of traditional business career and then the decision to join Cirque du Soleil.
Yeah, that was a very tough decision because, I was used to work for traditional organization and then joining Cirque du Soleil, which was, a bunch of street performers at the beginning that was trying to travel the world with their shows was kind of a very risky decision for me. But I couldn't resist. And the clincher for me is when Guy told me, if you want to work at the international scope, you have to join the circus. And the rest, as we say, is history.
And talk a little bit about, you had a business career. You had been in the public relations business. Tell us what were you doing right before you joined Cirque du Soleil.
Yeah, interestingly enough, when I was the owner of the largest public relation firm in Canada, I helped Guy in 1986, and he couldn't pay my bill. And moving forward, 13 years later, when I became the CEO of a TV network in Canada, I called Guy and I said, I would love to have your TV rights. By then, Cirque was already very successful, but he sent me the most touching note the following day of that conversation. He sent a note to his marketing vice president saying, this guy helped me 13 years ago. Do what you have to do to make sure that he has our TV rights. That was so touching. And it said a lot about his loyalty. And the relationship start building from that point. And that's 4 years later, after we were working together on some TV shows, that he did this famous phone call that literally changed my life.
And so can you take us to the early days? You were not there on the Cirque du Soleil, but when you had got Guy and Gilles Charles and Guy Caron. And how important was Le Cirque Reinvent, each one of those pieces that came together to really turn Cirque du Soleil into what it became prior to your stewardship?
That was such an amazing event in Montreal when Cirque du Soleil started in 1984, to observe people like Guy Laliberté and Gilles Sainte Croix and Guy Caron dreaming of conquering the world with those shows. And we were just looking at them and wishing them the best of luck. But everybody was very skeptical about how they could make it happen. And it's only by 1987 that they moved to Los Angeles for the first time. That's the real breakthrough happened. And then all of us that were watching, the birth of that organization realized that it could happen.
So your first position was not as, you came in as president of New Ventures, and then you were involved in the Battersea Project. And that seemed like, to say that it's a challenging project, it would be an understatement. Tell us about the Battersea Project and your first years at Cirque du Soleil.
Yeah, that was quite something, because I used to go in meetings and I couldn't understand the business model that they were talking about, because literally what the real estate developer wanted to do was to leverage the cultural content of Cirque du Soleil to have a bigger footprint for his real estate development. And we were almost his loss leader. But we were the loss leader, meaning that we would lose money and they will make a ton of money with their real estate project. So when I came to Guy and I argued about that, he looked at me and he says, "You're running yourself out of a job." And I said, "Guy, I don't care, because I don't want to be famously known for someone that has hurt Cirque du Soleil." And he says, "Oh, you really believe in what you're saying?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And we went to meet with the real estate developer. Guy realizes right there that what I was saying was true. And he walked away from the deal right there.
So in Balancing Acts, you said the Varakai was your chance to learn the business, and Zumani was when you started to assert yourself. Can you tell us about these productions and your involvement in them?
Yeah, that was the first new show that we have created and produced while I was there. And at that time, I had moved from New Venture to really live entertainment, and I wanted to know everything about the process. So I spent in the back of the big tent, evenings after evenings, just watching Guy working with the creative team, and then I understood from there that first and foremost, you have to be clear about the creative process you give to your creator. You have to be able to invest a lot of your time observing the evolution of the show and be able to be agile and make decisions right on the spot. So that was an amazing learning curve for me.
So you had a famous party that Guy put. All of his parties were famous, but there's a very famous one where George Harrison attended one of the parties. Tell us about that party. And it seems like you were a little scornful of the amount of money that was being spent on the parties. But that party led to the collaboration with the Beatles. So tell us about the party and how that sort of led to the collaboration with the Beatles.
Yeah, that was an annual party that Guy used to organize when the Formula One race comes to Montreal. So he was doing it every year. And before the party, I said, "Guy, we're spending quite a bit of money here. So do we need to do that?" And he says, "Yeah, you will come. You will see that it's an amazing springboard for me to try some new artistic content. It's also a great opportunity to meet our promoters coming from all over the world, and a lot of international celebrities and the drivers from Formula One are attending. So go through the motion with me, and then you tell me the week after if it's worth the investment." And guess what? That was the party when George Harrison came in and lead us to have a show with the Beatles. So he was laughing at me. Guy was laughing at me saying, "So Daniel, what do you think?" I said, "I think it's a good investment."
So George died on November 29th. And so I guess the challenge of seeing that, the many hurdles that you had to get through to get that partnership. Walk us through some of the challenges that you faced.
At the opposite, then Ringo and Paul and Olivia and Yoko gathered, and they said, "We have to make it happen for the souvenir of George, who wanted this project to happen so much." And it eased the process, it accelerated the project, and 15 years later, 16 years later, here we are with one of the most successful show of Cirque du Soleil.
So one of I don't want to describe it as a misstep, but there was some challenges related to the music, and then you decided that you needed to parachute George Martin in. Tell us about that. That issue, and you came up with hey, we need someone else to help us navigate this.
Yeah, first of all, someone has to understand that the Beatles had never ever allowed a live entertainment company to do a show with their music, and they were, they had to be reassured that we will treat their music properly. And that was a big issue. There was a lot of tension between our creative people and their people. And then Guy and I came up with the idea of using George Martin as the musical director. And when I called Neil Aspinall, who was their manager at the time, he said, "You would agree to that?" And I said, "Yeah." And that was the breakthrough that made the Beatles feel good about the project. And we felt good because working with George, and George brought his son, Giles, and from there, it really eased not only the financial negotiation, but much more importantly, the creative process, because then all of the sudden, there was what is the most important thing in a creative project. It's trust. And then the trust was established between the Beatles and Cirque du Soleil.
So in the spring of 2006, you become CEO. What were some of the key productions during this period, Zion? And then once you became CEO, a couple of years later, the Great Recession hit. So walk us through that period of your stewardship of Cirque du Soleil.
Yeah, that was a huge period of growth. And we couldn't do no wrong because every shows that we were developing was a huge success. We've been working with Zumani in Las Vegas, and then Ka, which was a huge breakthrough. And in the same period, we were developing Zaya in Macau and Zed in Tokyo. And it was the rest of the world was leading to this huge, recession, the huge financial crisis. And we were almost ignoring it by developing all those shows. And one day the reality hit us, and some of the shows has to be shut down for some economic realities. So that was a good learning for us that we should develop at a much more normal pace, and also that we should be more careful when the rest of the world is saying that there will be a crisis. Maybe we should be a little bit more prudent and listen to what's happening in the world.
So let's move forward to 2011. Michael Jackson, the Immortal World Tour is premiered, and then 2 years later, you premiered Michael Jackson 1. Tell us about those productions and the ultimate success of those two productions.
First of all, you would remember when, unfortunately, Michael died, AEG was about to produce 40 shows of Michael in London. And obviously it didn't happen. And then I thought that maybe AEG will be presenting, the tribute show. But the mother of Michael Jackson said to the manager of Michael that if there is one company that should produce a show for Michael Jackson, it has to be Cirque du Soleil, because Michael loved our organization, and I had the privilege of hosting him in Montreal in our creative studio. So then we were blessed to have this amazing creative challenge, and then again, we have been working closely with the estate, and we have also hired creative people that used to work with Michael, again, in order to ease the creative process. And those two shows were among the best shows we ever produced, and the touring show was a huge success worldwide. but the permanent show is still in Las Vegas and is still working very, very well, selling a ton of tickets. And all of that because of the mother of Michael decided that it would be Cirque du Soleil.
So you're having great success, and then all of a sudden, guy comes along and says, "We're retaining Goldman Sachs to sell the company." Were you blindsided by that, or were you prepared for that? And then walk us through that process.
Yeah, first of all, I had a great complicity with Guy, so I knew it was coming. For the last 2 years, as the owner of the company, he wanted to do something else. And I knew it was coming. But nevertheless, when the real day happened and he says, "I'm leaving," and he said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm staying." He was a bit surprised that I would say that, but I felt that to protect the value of the company, to protect the creativity of the company, if Guy was leaving, I thought that one of us should stay. And I had no choice than to move forward. And I went through the full transition mode, doing the transaction and then taking over and keeping the company on a good track.
And so the TBG, the financing gets done, then all of a sudden we run into COVID.
That's when we hit the wall.
And you had to lay off 4,679 employees. That I know that must have been hard. So walk us through the first couple of months of 2020.
Yeah, first of all, the company was growing. I had the support from TPG and the other investors, and life was good for me. And then all of a sudden, within 48 hours, we had to shut down all of our shows. From $1 billion of revenue, 0 revenue. And then we were very concerned that the company, will not survive. Yeah. But we've been lucky because the brand is so strong that we have been able to convince the creditors that it would make sense for them to transform their debt in investment. And they went farther than that. They have invested an additional $375 million in order to give us the liquidity we needed to relaunch all of our shows. So that was misery for me. That was a nightmare to let our people go. But today you're talking to someone who has a lot of joy and happiness because the company is back up and running.
And you've handed off the CEO baton to Stéphane Lefebvre?
Yeah.
Tell me about his background, and were you ready to hand off the baton?
Yeah, what happened is, when I saw that the company was solved and resolved and go back, then I came back to the board and I said, I think now is the time to ensure the sustainability of the company for the next 10 years. And I have a great CEO that I believe in. He's a good friend of mine, Stéphane Lefebvre, with whom I've been working for 6 years and working during the crisis in the trenches. So I said he should be the CEO. And the board said, we would agree with your recommendation, Daniel, as long as you accept to stay for 2 years. So that was a smart decision from them because it's ensured a smooth transition for Cirque, smooth transition for Stéphane, and frankly, a smooth transition for me as well.
And so what is your next act?
So that's why I published this book, because I said to myself, now is the time to give back. And I think the book is the first springboard for me to give back to the next generation and to the youth in particular. There is nothing more rewarding for me to see a young kid in the early 20s that is dreaming to change the world. And now I hope through the learnings in my book, they would have a recipe to see how they can make it happen based on this amazing example of a bunch of street performers that have built the most important live entertainment company in the world. And that's my motivation now. What can I do today to influence someone to start something new and change the world with amazing artistic content or amazing innovation that will help us have a better life.
And Daniel, is there any part of your story or the Cirque du Soleil's story that you'd like to share that you haven't shared so far in this interview?
No, I think we cover pretty much. But the one thing I want to insist upon, if I may, is creativity is not only at the heart of Cirque du Soleil. I radically say to someone, without creativity, there is no business. And we have a ton of examples of that. We know that at one point, Kodak ignored that the world was shifting to digital. And at the other end, a guy like Steve Jobs knew that by innovating, Apple will become a leader. So you have to decide what you want to do in life moving forward. Do you want to innovate and be a leader? Or do you want to keep your status quo and maybe die one day because your company will not be able to survive?
Well, Daniel, it was a delight reading the book, and equally delightful to hear you share your anecdotes. I recommend the book to everyone, and I think you've done a marvelous job of integrating the Cirque du Soleil story with your thoughts on leadership and creativity, because it's hard to integrate those two. But I think you've done a beautiful job in the book. So we wish you love and peace and. Whatever Michael Jackson and John Lennon would say. We wish you best of luck going forward.
Thank you very much, and same to you, sir.